Really lovely to see you again, Nina. After, I don't know, I mean, we were just talking briefly before this, about 5 years, I think, since I
Mm.
last saw you,
Mm.
in a sense of really speaking with you. So I'm super excited. First of all, congratulations. You
Thank you.
are, I don't know if you realize it, but you are the first MCC
I didn't
coach to come from
know.
Animas. Yeah, you are. That's an amazing achievement. Master certified coach with the ICF after what, 6 years? I think you joined us in 2015.
Yeah. Yeah, 2014 is when I started coaching, so it's not been long. 7
It's,
years.
it's amazing. And of
Yeah.
course, what I'm fascinated by is what that journey looks like in terms of how you develop the amount of client work to become an MCC, and how did you
Mm.
do that in such a way that you could consistently do it and balance the rest of your life? Because I know you became a mum in that time and all sorts of stuff.
Twice.
So yeah, perhaps you could just kind of share, Nina, who you are as a coach. Let's get that on the table first. Who are you as a coach?
Oh, who am I as a coach? What I realized, Nick, is that coaching is quite a spectrum. It's a spectrum from anything from, Anthony Robbins, rah, 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 let's motivate, to let's practically help you, pretty much like a consultant, to the therapy end. And if anything, I'm pretty close to the therapy end of the spectrum. But I straddle a lot of emotional journeys with my clients with some practical help. So
Mm,
it's very forward facing, but I'd say it's highly emotionally orientated.
mm.
That's really my approach.
Last time I spoke to you all those years ago, you were really fascinated by compassion
Yeah.
focused therapy. Is that still part of your practice?
Yeah, well remembered. I think self-compassion is a big part of it, because to really go into your emotions, you need to accept. So a lot of the work that I do is about self-acceptance at a truly deeper level,
Mm,
rather than, yeah, it's okay what I've done. So then compassion focused therapy, but directed at the self, is quite important.
yeah, yeah, great. So talk to me about this journey. I mean, you started coaching in 2014. You joined Animas in 2015.
Mm,
You're now an MCC, the first from the
mm,
Animas world. What's that
mm.
journey been like? Like, what? Give me the kind of the headlines of that 6 7 years.
Um, when you say how I built my practice and how it's transformed, I think the biggest thing I noticed is that it went in waves of doing different things. And that was pretty much how my career before that went. So there were
Mm,
certain things I wanted to develop and I wanted to experience, and I went with that.
yeah,
So initially, I guess I started by just coaching anyone.
yeah,
Very quickly started to think about the red velvet rope and who am I really letting in my practice, and started saying no to people.
yeah.
Once I started saying no, that was when I developed well, actually, this is who fits me best.
Mm,
Um, Initially, I spent a lot of time thinking about marketing and my best approaches.
yeah.
Very quickly, it became just word of mouth and
Uh-huh.
just being out there. So instead of actually actively marketing, I started doing stuff that I liked doing.
Mm,
So I liked doing the podcasts. I liked doing certain workshops. I now like working with two colleagues that I work with here, running workshops,
mm,
and they're focused on scale up. So I started just doing things I like
yeah,
and getting out there in the world. And the more I got out there in the world, the more people saw me. Um, so marketing became less of a thing. That
yeah.
was an extra thing that I had to do. So the first thing I noticed is that the phases and how marketing became integrated. Um, I think I started by really coaching professionals who are very much like me,
Yeah.
highly analytical, disconnected with themselves.
Mm,
I then, my coaching followed natural waves in my own life. So you mentioned that I became a mother.
mm,
So actually, then that became more important to me. So I also started working with parents who were struggling to balance all the demands on them. And
yeah.
again, when you speak about compassion, struggling to accept themselves
Mm,
as they were, um, and then helping them navigate how they could bring up children in a way that
mm,
felt authentic to them. So I then did that. More recently, I've been doing much more corporate work. So I kind of felt a little bit of a disconnect from the corporate world, and I've gone back into work with organizations.
mm,
So I guess there's a couple of things. Firstly, marketing is very integrated. The second thing is very much following a flow of my own life and what I'm
yeah.
interested in. And the third thing is it goes in accepting whatever's out there to be able
Mm,
to explore what the opportunities are. And sometimes that might not always be obvious, but
mm,
it's really accepting that there's a whole world out there. But Nick, the undercurrent is you got to accept that you want to do it full time.
right.
If you dabble in it, you don't get to this level.
What does that look like practically, Nina? When you talk about accept you've got to do it full time, what does that look like as a way of being as a coach?
So the first thing is financially, because we spoke about it when we did some of our courses, how you need to set it up in a way that works for you, and finance is one of them.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did is I worked as a freelance consultant before I really set up the practice. So I had a bit of a buffer in
Yeah.
savings initially. But the second thing I did is anything that I needed to complement my income at the start was very much related. So for example, it would be running group workshops or running training sessions for corporates. So it was things which weren't exactly coaching, but they weren't a million miles away. So they were still credible. They still got me in front of potential clients,
Yeah.
but they gave me that buffer income. And in terms of my way of being, well, I practice the work that I do with my clients. So it's funny because in a little while you asked me about development, and really my development has been on myself. I've done that work. I faced the sleepless nights with the kids and the challenges that I'm not a good mother. I faced the threat of, well, I'm leaving now and I've got an unstable income. I faced the emotional challenges of a relationship, shifting country, making new friends, showing up in the world, and did that work on myself.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my training, actually, Animas aside, was really participating in things before I then trained in the things that I do.
Right. In a way, if I was a new or sort of like newly qualified coach listening to you, Nina, I might feel like, wow, that all makes sense. So how come I'm not feeling that? How come I don't know how to face the sleepless nights around money? And do I have time to work on myself? I've got to do this marketing. I've got to get clients. And I'm kind of curious what your, not so much advice, but how might you help somebody think through, like, okay, look, there's a sticky period at the start. It's difficult. How do I get through that?
Actually, I'm going to answer your question differently. What I'm going to say is, firstly, yes, there is a ramp up period, which is why you need a buffer to do it. That is
Right.
the reality of it. If you don't have someone who can support you financially, or you don't have savings buffer, you're not going to be able to do it because it takes time. But the second thing is, if you don't believe in it enough to go through it and get the coaching yourself, then you're going to struggle to convince a client that they need it.
Right.
I know the work that I did on myself changed my life unrecognizably in every facet you can imagine. I know it. So clients believe me when I tell them.
Yeah.
And the thing about the MCC is, I kind of initially I thought, well, do I need all these kind of qualifications? And what I realized is the ICF have done very well at creating a path for you to follow that helps you with your development. So if you're not sure about, I wouldn't expect a newly qualified coach to look at an MCC and go, yeah, okay, I want to be there. Like that doesn't make sense to me. But the next step is to start working out, maybe I need to get a little bit away from the frameworks, and start showing up a bit more.
Yes.
I can still rely on frameworks in the background. I just don't make it so obvious.
Yeah.
And I start to be more present. And that's really what the ACC starts to do. Is it starts to say, okay, you're going to have a bit of a structure around your coaching. There's not just a conversation, there's a structure. The PCC says, okay, let's start to take out these frameworks now. Let's start to make this more impactful. And then the MCC says, you got to show up without really getting in the boat with your clients, weather the storm with them, but hey, you're there, but you're not really holding their hand. So you're fully showing up and putting on the table what you feel, but you're not getting dragged into the storm. So it's really one level at a time. Start a structured conversation, get to a place where that conversation is impactful, and then show up fully. And that in itself is development.
Yeah. Out of interest, Nina, one of the things I've noticed with that journey for the ICF is that there's no obvious developmental route that exists that says, here's how to go from ACC to PCC to MCC, here's what to let go of, and here's what to develop, and so on, other than if you find the right mentor. What was your journey towards getting through those different developmental stages? Was it just natural? Did it just happen? Or did you have to really focus on how do I get to that next point?
Yeah, it's a good question. It isn't a real structured path on purpose because of the variety that exists within coaching. So they deliberately left it open in that, and it is the mentorship that makes the big difference. If you can get the right mentor, they can help guide you through it. So I think ACC is, to me, looking back, it seemed like a stressful moment, but it is pretty much ticking a box. Do you have the right kind of parameters around your coaching, which isn't that complicated to work out yourself? I think the mentoring helps you get in the mood of mentoring. With the PCC and the MCC, that's where the mentoring really comes alive. And also with when you look at the coaching requirements and competency frameworks at each level, and you start to understand that, that helps. So it went from ACC, pretty much natural development, just try and think about the structures, use the mentoring a bit, to PCC, okay, well, now I'm doing recorded sessions at a different level. Really start to critically analyze them with your mentor. And don't be afraid to show up with your mentor and let them listen to it. To MCC, which became much more about learning from other coaches. So I then exposed myself. So something called real coaching. I think it's called real-time coaching, but if you Google kind of example coaching, you can download, and I downloaded 4 volumes of MP3s, which was something like 100 recorded sessions from PCC to MCC, listen to them continuously. And you pick up different things in the style that make you think, oh, okay, I wonder why she did that. I wonder why he went there. I would have gone there. And you start to question why they're doing what they're doing. So that helped a lot. And just recording after recording after recording, constantly listening to yourself. Cool. So it's really holding a mirror up, both to yourself and with a mentor.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, fascinating. And what comes across there, Neena, is the absolute commitment you must have given to that process. It's not just a case of going, well, let me do my 10 hours of mentoring and let me get my 2,500 hours of coaching and I'm done. It's like a real sense of, wow, I have to really learn something new here.
Yeah, it's different at this level. ACC felt a bit nervous, because it was all new, but it was fine. PCC, a little sticky at places, but it was fine. MCC was hard. It was hard. Like really showing up and showing up in that way was hard. And I felt that it was a challenge to push myself to not get dragged into what was going on with clients. And it's subtle.
Yeah. So
you think you're not guiding them and showing them. You think you're just there with them. But under the surface, you have an agenda, and that shows up at MCC level. It shows up.
Yeah.
And so I found that hard. Like real time regulating your own emotions when triggered. And constant and consistent over 45 minutes to an hour over 2 sessions. Hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's funny because the number of hours, 2,500, kind of just racked up. It wasn't like I was focused on to get to that. It was just suddenly one day, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm here now, so maybe I should start the MCC process. I wouldn't approach PCC and MCC as a tick in the box. I don't think you should bother. What I felt was they're very rare in coaching to really have those development opportunities that forces you to critically analyze your own development. So I wouldn't waste it. If you don't feel like you can commit to it, save it for another day. Because it's worth having that reflection point where you stop and you think, okay, well, how am I showing up as a coach? I sometimes think about that with the MBA. Sorry, it's the MBA. I sometimes think about it because you do it at a certain point in your life, and then you think, well, if I did it 10 years later, what would I have got out of it then? So I'd say the same thing about qualifying. Do it when you're ready to commit. ACC, fine. Do it. It's okay. But to go higher, commit.
Yeah. I love that. To what extent has it actually changed your own way of practicing coaching now?
I didn't expect it, but because I found the MCC hard, I show up even more confidently now. It's changed how I practice because it's
Right.
changed how I show up. I put much more on the table now. I will say, you know, I notice, Nick, that you're hesitating a bit when you say that, and so I'm wondering what's going on. I'm noticing that I'm feeling something in my body as a coach. You know, I'm just wondering if that resonates with you or something
Mm.
comes up for you. But I'm not doing it just to say it. I'm
Mm.
feeling it in the moment,
Yeah.
and I'm also really willing for it to just be my own stuff and to be put
Yeah.
aside. So it's changed how I am as a coach completely. But in my business, um, one thing I battled with is my age. I feel like as a coach, you tend to be a bit like wine. Like as wine ages, it becomes more valuable.
Mm.
Somehow, when I started and I'm early 30s, I didn't feel like I had the credibility to go in front of people, even though I had a corporate background, I had a strong, you know, qualification base, I had a strong learning development base,
Mm.
but I still felt like, oh, I'm a bit young for some of the clients that I'm coaching. With the MCC, all of that doubt's gone away.
Mm.
So that's nice, actually.
Mm.
I can really just like, okay, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm always learning, but I know what I'm doing.
Mm. Wow.
That's nice.
Let me take you back, if I may, Nina, to when you were describing the headlines of your coaching journey. There was something you talked about the waves of life and how your coaching responded to them. And I'm picking up these kind of two ideas of the waves of life and your response to them, and the journey to MCC and letting go, in a sense, of underlying agendas. And I'm wondering how you balance working with somebody whose stage of life you have some resonance with and experience of, and at the same time really embodying that coaching place of unknowing. I'm kind of curious on your take on that, really.
Oof. It's a hard one to explain in words, but generally I don't know. I have an instinct. And when I have an instinct, I put it on the table for us to look at together. So it becomes much more of a partnership of me just bringing things that we're going to examine, right, wrong, left field, right field, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And we're going to go with that. So even if I've got experience of the place that they're in, okay, well that's information for us to look at together.
Yeah.
Is why is that coming up for me when you speak to me?
Yeah.
Why is my doubt as a mother coming up when you talk about how you're parenting your son? Rather than, oh yeah, are you having doubt as a father? Is that what's worrying you? It's just more noticing what gets triggered in you as a result of the conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, Nick, coaching's funny because if you really let go of leading the person, then there's like 1,000 different ways in which your client can develop during a coaching session. And that's all okay, right? So if what resonates in me is how you're showing up as a father versus your work-life balance, fine. So that's what we explore. If that doesn't feel like that's on your agenda for today, then we go to somewhere else. There's lots of things for my clients to learn about, lots of different phases and places in their life.
Yeah.
So I very much go with the instinct of what's coming up.
Yeah.
I think a little bit like I used to play squash when I was younger. I feel a little bit like that wall that the ball just bounces off. And you just kind of let it bounce and you see what happens. It's a fun game.
And yet,
yeah, there's one nuance though.
You go on.
I think the nuance is, unless you are really self-aware and have done the work yourself, you're less likely to pick up when it is your stuff.
Right.
And so I think that's the nuance where I had a client, for example, who spoke about what it was like for her mother not to be there and how that was coming up for her. And, I then know that that's a red area for me, that there's a danger of my stuff coming up because I know what it is that triggers me.
Yeah.
So that helps me to then say, wait a minute, maybe this is a topic that for the moment until I've dealt with it, we can't talk about this.
To what extent do you feel that know thyself kind of idea is important to coaches at every stage, or is it something that becomes more important as you develop to the MCC and so on?
Every stage. In some ways, it becomes more important to be able to stay in the boat with them without getting fully involved. But coaching is an objective conversation with a client where you create a safe space. If you don't know yourself, you can't create that safety. So that's true for a newly qualified coach as well. And if you have doubts over your ability to do that, just do some work on yourself. Go get some support. That'll help you more than reading a book.
Right.
Yeah. It will help you more than going and doing some SEO.
Yeah.
So and sometimes it's just, we get too busy as new coaches ticking boxes.
Sure. Yeah. What talking about ticking boxes, and don't take this as a ticking boxes question, but I'm curious what's next for you. You've done your MCC. Where do you go next?
No, it's a good question. I've started doing more on the leadership and corporate end, because I think that something that held me back inside was feeling like I could really show up there. So fees changed, but also how I'm willing to show up as a trusted advisor almost. It's funny because I hesitate because I'm not really an advisor.
Sure.
I'm more of a trusted safe space for them where they can bounce and spring off their own ideas. So I do that more. But also I'm setting things up much more. So workshop front, I'm doing the designing the content and running with the energy of it. So last week I ran an all-day workshop with scale-ups, emerging leaders and scale-ups. And because it's my stuff, I can do what I want.
Yeah.
So I'm there, I'm quirky, I'm jumping around, and some point I got them making elephant noises and animal noises and lining up by animals without speaking. Like, you can do what you want. So it's much more free running with how I want to do it rather than someone else's way of doing it. I'm much more on the corporate end. I'm also doing more associate work now, which I never thought I would do. But what I realized at this level, they don't mind if I just do it my way. It's nice.
When you were talking earlier, you talked about first you work with people who are very much like you, the analytical people, and then it became parents, and then you said very casually, but now I'm going back to corporates, and it was very like, just turn the switch and bang, there's your corporate clients. But a lot of people don't experience things that way. What's your approach to now getting clients? Is it just through contacts you've got, or like, do you have you've eschewed the kind of marketing approach? So how would you turn that switch to corporate, for instance?
It's a hard one.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because I've noticed my marketing has been quite organic. So firstly, there were a couple of people that I really resonated with, and then I started working with them, and they had quite an extensive network because I'm now here in Amsterdam, and then I worked off their network. Then there was one company that I liked the idea of, so I started working with them a bit more, and then that company started bringing me more work, and then that gave me a clue into associate work, and then I started looking at some of those associate companies that I could work with, and then it went from there, but it's kind of one block at a time.
Yeah.
Nick, conscious of time.
Yes.
Really sorry. I know we're a few minutes late, but I have a call straight after this.
Okay. Well, I'll let you go. Is there any final thing you'd like to say, just that you wanted to kind of share? And if not, that's fine.
Ask yourself if you want to do it full time or not. If you want to do it, give yourself a period of time to fully jump into it and try. Like, give yourself 2 years to commit to it fully and do it. If it doesn't work out after that period of time, fair enough, go back and do other things. Yeah. But if you dabble in it, it's never going to go anywhere. You can't, like, coaching is not something you can do for 5 hours a week and then expect to get to the level that some people are talking about getting to. Yeah. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Neena. Well, congratulations again. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you again, and hopefully see you around.
Sounds good. Thank you, Nick. Welcome back.